the timing is eerie. Obviously, we've been watching the dissolution of Don't Ask, Don't Tell over a period of time, and it's like, well, what's so special about this? Well, it's Veterans Day, but you'll understand in a moment why we're so excited. In 1992, the Clinton administration, faced with difficult choices regarding gays and lesbians serving in the military, enacted a policy we all know called Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Now, the idea at the time was to forge a compromise. Gay and lesbian service members would conceal their identity, and their superior officers in the military justice system would in turn not investigate or prosecute suspected gays and lesbians. All the while, it would remain illegal to be gay and serve in the U.S. military. Well, that law, well-intentioned as it may have been, as we all know, turned out to be a horrible idea. If anything, the witch hunting and the tattletaling of gays and lesbians grew more pernicious instead of less so. The U.S. Army Training Guide on Homosexual Conduct, did a little research on the internet, actually included comic book style instructions on how and when to turn in one's fellow service members as gay, and included this little gem, quote, "A statement by a reliable person that he or she had observed or discovered a soldier saying or putting in writing a statement that acknowledged a homosexual act or the intent to engage in a homosexual act was enough to get you busted." It smacks of 1950s McCarthy witch hunts, and if DADT is not witch hunting, then I don't know what is. Thousands of worthy and hardworking servicemen and women were discharged under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, many without pensions or other benefits promised to those who served our country. Well, finally, last year, after a whole lot of wrangling, Congress and the military began to finally dismantle Don't Ask, Don't Tell, seeing it for the boondoggle that it really is. And we're in the process of placing it on the scrap heap of regulations like those that prohibited blacks and whites from serving together, the integration of women in the military, and other arcane directives. We're definitely at the dawn of a new era, but where do we go from here? We are just at the dawn. As a church, we ask, what about LGBT service members of faith? How are chaplains and other faith leaders in the military growing and progressing with this? Where will our service members turn for guidance? We've got an amazing panel of people here today from a variety of perspectives, each of whom has an intimate experience with military service, and each of whom has, in his or her own way, been affected by Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Because we have such a strong panel, I'm going to break from a traditional format, and rather than go through a series of bios and crossfire questions, I feel their stories are just so vital, I'd rather just let each of them speak for themselves, and it may work best to hold audience questions until the end. So let me simply introduce the panelists, and let's get right to it. And I just met our first panelist. Tell me your name again.
Hayes.
Hayes.
Yes.
Hollywood Hayes. And what is your status?
Right now I'm active reserve in the military in the Army.
Very good. Next to him we have my dear friend, Chris Landavazo, who is a senior LA deputy sheriff and a star veteran, if you will. We have Brittany Collins, who is on her way to being a Top Gun pilot, that's what I like to say, learning the C-130 aircraft. We have Calpernia Addams, who has a unique perspective of facing DADT from a whole variety of angles, and we'll talk about that. Tom Carpenter, who is part of our HUMC family, also representing SLDN, the Service Members Legal Defense Network, who were called into service this week, in the past month, if any of you have been looking at headlines around the case of our final panelist, JT Chestnut, who has just been through a saga after having gone AWOL at 18 following harassment and other terrible things happening in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, recently went home to face charges. There's our panel. Does anyone want to jump in and start first? Silence. Then I'm going to point at Chris and have him talk.
Wow. Thanks. Good morning. Thank you guys for all being here and actually coming to listen to our stories and kind of
be able to take from this the direction that our community needs to go with regards to the full implementation of the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I joined the United States Navy back in 1996. It was just a few years after President Clinton had actually enacted the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, which did not exist prior to that date. When I went through and I signed up, obviously they did ask the question about homosexuality, and I did mark no on that box, knowing full well at the time that I was gay. But I knew that if I were to check yes, that it was an automatic disqualification, and I would not be able to serve my country. With regards to my family background, I come from a family of public service. My dad is a dispatch supervisor for the Redlands Police Department. My older brother is a deputy sheriff. My little brother is a firefighter. And I am now currently a deputy sheriff of LA County. So it's come from a very strong tradition, family in public service. My grandparents were both in the military, and my father was on the Air Force. So I was kind of geared just towards public service from a very young age. And I probably, unlike many people on the panel, had a very good go in the Navy. Other than the fact of having to hide my sexuality, I was very successful. I went from an E1 to an E6 in 5 years. I was an air traffic controller. I had put in for the aviation enlisted commissioning program so that I could actually go fly jets. And that's kind of where the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy kind of came into effect for me. At that phase in my life, I had kind of started to transition, and I had dated a little. Because I was in the military and I didn't want to get caught, and I knew that I wanted to be a pilot and get that commissioning, I knew that it was really important that I kind of really reserve my kind of personal life during that time. I traveled the world, had a great time doing it, but at the same time I knew that I would never be able to have a normal, if you will, if there is such thing as a normal relationship. That would be a kind of an impossibility. My want desire to have a family also kind of was on the back burner. And I think that, you know, for me, coming from a very strong background of family values, it's like those were things that were instrumental in my life and things that I absolutely wanted, but I knew I would never have. With that commissioning program, I would have had to sign a 10-year contract to actually become a pilot in the military. And, you know, at that time in my life, I had started dating and was not really geared yet towards just kind of stepping away from that relationship and, you know, just kind of going with what I really wanted in my professional life. And as a result, I made the decision to opt out. Now, mind you, coming from the enlisted side into the officer ranks is a very difficult process. I was one of 3 chosen Navy-wide to actually fly a jet, which was a tremendous kind of process in general. I know, he's a proud pop over here. But it's, you know, there's a lot of letters, there's a lot of kind of having to put together a very strong package. And so to have admirals and captains and people that, you know, were well respected in the military write these letters of commendation saying that this is a stellar person, this is the type of person who we need in our leadership in the Navy, was tremendous. However, I decided for me personally that I was not willing to kind of put my life on hold permanently to be able to satisfy the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, and therefore decided to leave the military service. I did stay as an active reservist. I was recalled after 9/11. I actually went into law enforcement from the military, did about 6.5 years with Ventura PD, but then right after 9/11 was recalled back to active military duty. It was also kind of an interesting time because I got stationed in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and at that point in my life, I think I had kind of made that transition of being very comfortable with who I am, and, you know, didn't necessarily kind of abide by all the Don't Ask, Don't Tell rules, you know, while in Hawaii. So it's like, you know, going out to a gay bar, or, you know, just doing whatever I wanted to do within the realms of policy, of course. You know, it was one of those times where I really got to kind of see exactly how it could be without that policy in place. And so Since my time in the military, I've gotten out, I've done a lot of public speaking, I've done a lot of stuff with the media with regards to the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, because I truly do believe that it is an important institution, especially for our young people who need some direction or who want to serve their country. And I think that, in all honesty, that there is no greater service than public service, and that we should encourage everybody from every community, especially from our LGBT community, to go out and see the world and to have that foundation. So that is kind of my story. I now serve as a deputy sheriff for the LA County Sheriff's Department. I've been on, this is my 10th year anniversary. So it's very exciting, and still just continue to work. So thank you for being here. That's my story. Pass it on to you.
Well, my name's Brittany. I'm currently actively serving in the Air Force, and I'm really fresh. I've been enlisted for a year and a half, but I just got out of training like 4 or 5 months ago. And so I was at boot camp basically when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, and they were going through all of the briefings, teaching straight people how to live with gay people, and all those crazy policies that have to be implemented. And like literally, we were sitting in there in this briefing, and I had found my fellow gay friend in boot camp, and we were sitting there during this briefing, and a master sergeant was sitting there, and he's like, I just want you guys to know that there are gays amongst us, probably right now. like we were the lepers or something, and we were just, it was just unbelievable. Like really, like where we're at now in our life, like it was unbelievable. But it's about time, I guess. But so recently, I was in Boise, Idaho, and I was on a small deployment fighting fires in Texas from Idaho, but yeah, that's another story. I was sitting at dinner with a lieutenant colonel, and I want to be a pilot, much like Chris, but I was sitting at dinner with him. Okay, let me get back on track. I'm sitting at dinner with him, and he's like, we're talking, drinking wine. It's very casual, and he knows I want to be a pilot. I meet all the qualifications to be a pilot. I started flying when I was 15 years old. I did all the right things. I minded my P's and Q's, got good grades in school, like did all the right things. And he's like, Brittany, are you gay? And I'm like, I'm dressed like this. Like, yeah, I am. Okay, it's obvious. Okay, so he's like, well, there's been kind of talks amongst the unit about you. I was a college basketball player too, so that was kind of a red flag. So he's like, So, there's talk amongst the unit that I could potentially be gay, and if that's the case, then he said, you're never going to apply for us. He's like, we will not hire a lesbian to be a pilot here. We're very, he's like, being a pilot is a very image thing, and this was like completely off the record, and he was just giving me like honest insight, and I really appreciated it, but at the same time, I'm like, do I really want to be a part of this? And part of me is like, yes, I do, just to say, F you guys, I'm going to fly, and I'm going to fly my rainbow flag once I get there. But in the meantime, he's like, no one can know that you're gay. And he's like, the minute anybody finds out, you will not get hired through us. He's like, so just, monitor your Facebook. He's like, and if someone asks you, pretend you have a boyfriend. And I'm like, ew, So, as of April, I'm going to start the commissioning program for the Air Force to be a C-130 pilot. And until then,
Calpernia.
Well, I don't want to skip the first one.
Well, it's okay, yeah, let's go back. You're on second class in any stretch. Tell us what brought you to service, what your experiences have been. Am I correct that your service so far has been all post-DADT?
No, I joined when I was 17.
Okay.
And that was 2006. I joined February 6, 2006.
I can make a crack about how young he looks, but...
I joined while I was still in high school, and it was way before the repeal, and I knew about Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but I still joined anyway, just because at the time I wanted to be CIA, and that's one of the requirements, but now I'm a film major, but join the military to get my experience done for my resume. And when I joined, Don't Ask, Don't Tell, it wasn't really something I was worried about. I was just worried about doing my job to the best of my abilities. And I didn't really have, while serving on active duty, I didn't have too much problems with it because, like, most of my unit, they knew about me and they were really supportive. But in the beginning, it was kind of tough because you didn't know who you could trust with that secret. Because there were maybe a handful of people that were just super homophobic, and you knew they would just. I saw they worked on getting somebody kicked out, and watching that person just lose their career and having a stamp on his resume on his DD 214 kicked out under Don't Ask, Don't Tell scared the hell out of me. So.
Have you seen or felt a change since the policies have been dismantled?
In my personal experience, like I said, I had a lot of support in my unit, and pretty much like before it started, they started doing all the training, like she said, how to live with gays, and a lot of people, like during the training, you know, they'd say their homophobic remarks because they were still able to say it, but since then it's gotten a lot better.
It's interesting that in all of our conversation about the integration of gays and lesbians in the military, we speak more broadly about LGBT, but at least thus far in the military, it's all focused on LGB. So what about people that don't have a traditional gender identification? I'm really curious for your way on this, Calpernia.
Well, I'll try to put it all in a nutshell, but I'm a transsexual woman, and in 1990, I was in Nashville, Tennessee, and I was growing up in an insane Christian fundamentalist cult. So I was told you can't go to college because it'll lead you away from God, and you can't do this and that. So my only way out of Nashville, despite being profoundly unsuited for it, was to join the military. But it turned out I actually was really good at it. I joined the Navy in 1990 and I joined the Navy Hospital Corps, which is like a medic, EMT, some nursing stuff all rolled into one. And then I ended up going to the Field Medical Combat School to take care of Marines, specifically in combat situations for trauma-type medical things. And at this time, I had not transitioned. So I was sort of a thin, pale, feminine boy from all, outside appearances, but one who could tough it out and who never fell out of a march or who never quit doing their push-ups or anything. I was kind of a strange bird back then, but I did really well in the military. I was number 2 in my class, got to pick my duty stations, but then the first Gulf War happened. And so I went to the first Gulf War, served in Saudi Arabia with the Marines, and came back. And just about that time, President Clinton was elected, and the whole Don't Ask, Don't Tell thing started unfolding because he had made, if I remember right, campaign promises that he would allow gays to serve openly. And at the time, I didn't really understand that you could transition, so I thought, I'm just going to have to try to live as a gay boy, and this will be great because I'm having a good time in the military, I'm doing really well, so if President Clinton's elected, I'll at least be able to be honest about the fact that I like guys and, this and that. Meanwhile, in Alaska, I met this group of wilderness lesbians who sort of took me under their wing and took me camping, and they were airplane mechanics in Alaska, and we were just hiking through the train, and they would start the fires for me, and I would play music. I think I imprinted on the girls back then, and they've always been my best friends since. But we were all waiting with bated breath. We were like clipping. This was almost kind of pre-internet, so we were clipping newspaper articles, and Keith Meinhold had just come out, and this Navy guy on the covers of all these magazines. We were like, wow, it's happening, it's happening. And then Don't Ask, Don't Tell sort of was like a big wah-wah sad trombone thing, and we were like, oh no, because we were ready to come out. I had just bought some like gay pride ring necklaces and all these tacky things I would never wear now, but So it was such a disappointment, and we were like on this little island off the coast of Alaska, just, you know, waiting and hoping, and it didn't happen. So my 4 years were up at that time, so I went ahead and got out and transitioned and finally sort of found my truth as a woman. And shortly thereafter, in the ensuing years, you know, I started my entertainment career, and I met a young man who was active duty in the Army, and he was heterosexual, only dated women, but when his buddies found out that he was dating a transsexual woman, he started receiving harassment, everyone calling him faggot and homo and stuff in his Army, you know, group. And by the end of that, the harassment escalated so much against him that they beat him to death on the 4th of July in 1999 in his sleep. So, you know, it's been 11 years, so I don't even talk about this much publicly anymore, but it is part of this story. It's just weird that Don't Ask, Don't Tell came back around and sort of got me and the people in my life even years after I was out of the military, because that permissive policy implicitly and almost directly told the soldiers that gay people were unworthy and second class and less human. And it's easier to beat somebody to death in their sleep, I think, if you think they're less human than you. And so, you know, after that happened, all I wanted to do was honor Barry's memory and get justice. And thank God at that time, I met some really incredible groups like the Service Members Legal Defense Network, which Tom Carpenter here can talk a lot more about.
I think we practice this.
Yeah,
it was a great transition. There we are. Great segue. I go back a long, long way. I graduated from the Naval Academy and became a Marine fighter pilot. And I met my partner of 20 years while we were in the Marine Corps. This is long before Don't Ask, Don't Tell. People in my squadron that I trusted knew I was gay, and they were totally cool with it. It was not a problem for them. What really kind of set us off was a good friend of mine had come back from Vietnam. He had a Silver Star and 3 Purple Hearts. He'd come up through the ranks as an enlisted man. He was a major about a month from his retirement when he was picked up at a gay bar in Oceanside by the Shore Patrol. And they threw him out of the Marines with no pension, no nothing. And my partner and I looked at each other, we were both captains, and said, we can't live this lie any longer. This could happen to us when we get that old. He must have been like 38. we were in our 20s. And so we decided that was it. We had to leave the Marines at that point in time. I was involved with the Campaign for Military Service back in 1992, and actually knew the story about how we ended up with this promise from President Clinton. David Mixner, who many of you have probably heard of, was at a party with him, and a bunch of high rollers here in town, and Clinton said, what can I do for your community? And David said, well, get rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I'm sorry, get rid of the ban. And the president said, I'll do that. There were no military people in the group, because if I had been there, I would have said, easier said than done. Because when you try to pull this off, candidate Clinton, you're going to get a firestorm. And I think those of us who were around remember the Campaign for Military Service was set up to try to do that. They were not prepared, they weren't ready, it was kind of foisted on them, and they did the best that they could under the circumstances. And it was clear that Sam Nunn and some of the Southern Democrats were very much against this, and they had the military in their pocket. And the military was very against this. I found out later that when they created their working group in the Pentagon, a good friend of mine who was the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard, E-10, the highest ranking guy in the Coast Guard, was part of that working group. And he said to me later on, historically, that they had made up their mind long before they created that working group, that they were going to find reasons to find that gay people were incompatible with military service. So he, as a matter of protest, quit the working group. He said, I can't work with people that have made up their mind already. Well, sure enough, they studied this issue for a couple of months and they came up with a 10-page paper that concluded that homosexuality was incompatible with military service. And so the president was kind of in between the rock and the hard place. He promised this to the community, he wanted to do it, and then he had Sam Nunn and the conservatives in the Congress and the military up against him. So that's when he went to Les Aspin and said, let's see what we can do to make something work. And they came up with this don't ask, don't tell policy, and when I heard about it, I said, this will never work. And the reason it won't work is it's against the core values of the military, of honesty and integrity. You're requiring people to live a lie. Well, happy me, I got appointed to the Naval Academy by Strom Thurmond. Strom Thurmond was great, he had been for years. But when I went to Washington, they told me that I had to go deal with Strom Thurmond. So I went down there, and he wasn't in, but he had 3 Army colonels in there that I had to talk to and tell them that this thing was not going to work. And one of them, I recognized just last year, was Joe Uli Wilson. Remember the guy who said, "You lie, Mr. President"? That was him. So I spent 2 miserable hours with these people telling this thing would not work. So we ended up with this compromise known as don't ask, don't tell. And in a sense, it was a little bit better than before, because if you had been found out under the ban, they could court-martial you, send you to prison, and there was all sorts of bad stuff they could do to you, not just throw you out. Didn't typically happen, but it could. But don't ask, don't tell. Theoretically, if you didn't say anything, and people didn't ask you, you could still serve in the military. You could still be gay and lesbian or bisexual. Transgender is another issue, and serve in the military. But we saw what happened. 14,000 people got thrown out under don't ask, don't tell. And then there were countless thousands, estimate of 5,000 minimum a year, that just didn't stay in the service because of the consequences of don't ask, don't tell. And you raised an issue that I want to address, and this is the impact that the chaplains had on what happened in 1992. They were the strongest voice against getting rid of the ban. And we at SLDN, Service Members of the Legal Defense Network, I joined them about 1995, and I've been on the board since then. I was co-chair for about 7 years. We recognized that we had to deal with these chaplains, that they were going to be back at it again. And in the last 20 years, there's been a huge shift in the chaplaincy. When I was on active duty, it was mostly mainline denominations like Presbyterians, Methodists, Episcopalians, Catholics. But that's all changed. 75% of all chaplains today have graduated from Liberty University. They're all conservative evangelicals. Out of the 4,500 chaplains, we estimate almost 3,000 are evangelicals. So we set up an organization called the Forum on the Military Chaplains. We gathered together mainline denomination folks and decided that we were going to do kind of a flanking maneuver to deal with the chaplains before they created this new working group. Because we knew when the president said he was going to do this, we knew that they were going to drag this on and it was going to take a while. They'd have to have a working group. That's typical Washington. They either have a committee or a working group or some damn thing. Kick the can down the road. And so we decided to create this forum and that we would address these issues with the chaplains. Fortunately, some of the members of our group, which is made up of chaplains and lay people, there's about 70 of us, knew the chiefs of chaplains and the services. So the first thing we did was write a white paper on confidentiality, because what we were finding was going on was that people would come to their priests and their ministers and would say that they were gay, and then they'd be turned into their command and be thrown out. And the military had policies in place, but they weren't following. So we wrote a white paper, hand-delivered it to the chiefs of chaplains, and then he changed the regulations. They tightened everything up and said, you can't do that. The priest-dependent privilege is what it should be. It is a pure privilege, and it belongs to the penitent, and you can't tell people. So that's the first thing that we changed. Then we had other meetings with the chiefs of chaplains to talk about the repeal of don't ask, don't tell, and it's very interesting. The number one chaplain for the Army told us he was in favor of repeal. But then he went to a meeting with the Pentagon Working Group. He and the 3 chaplains, one for each service, 2-star generals and admirals. And they were asked by General Ham, who's the 4-star general in charge of the working group, and the general counsel for the DOD, a guy by the name of Jay Johnson, what they thought about repeal. And they said they were against repeal. So we had a meeting with the Pentagon. They called on the forum to meet, and I went to the Pentagon, had a meeting with about as many people as there are in this room. The very first question that came out of the mouth of the Navy captain is, tell us about the chaplains. How are we going to deal with the chaplains? And we fortunately had 3 chaplains there, one from the Army, one from the Navy, and one from the Air Force. And they said there wouldn't be a problem. And he said, well, how come the chiefs of chaplains are against this if you say there's not going to be a problem with it? And the answer was something that the line officers in the room didn't recognize, is that in order to be a chaplain, you have to be endorsed by your denomination. If they take away your endorsement, you lose your commission. If they take away your commission, you lose your pension. These guys are all 2 stars, you know, that are going to make a lot of money when they retire. So if they had been found, and they were all from Southern Baptist, Lutheran Senate, the Missouri Synod, the Lutheran Church, and another evangelical crowd, if they had said they were in favor of repeal, their endorsers were rejected or taken away the endorsement, and they would have lost their pensions. So that was a big deal. And the lights, but you can see the light bulbs going on in the room, all these line officers. I was sitting next to an Air Force 2-star general, and he said, now it makes sense. Now it makes sense. And they said, what are we going to do? He turned to me and said, this general says, what are we going to do about the Defense of Marriage Act? And I said, he said, would you agree to a workaround? I said, well, as a Pope Catholic, of course we will. And he said, well, we'll try to work around the Defense of Marriage Act because we know as leaders that we can't have 2 classes of citizens in the military. We have to have everybody on a level playing field. And we get it. And we know we got a problem with DOMA, which is where we're going forward. Even though Don't Ask, Don't Tell is gone, we've got 3 things that didn't get done. The first was there's no non-discrimination in this law. That was jerked out for political reasons. We couldn't get the law passed if we had that in there. Secondly, the benefit packages. None of the benefits, or most of the benefits that married people or people in relationships get in the military will go to gay couples. And the third is this transgender issue. It wasn't covered under the law, and it's a little complicated because transgender was not under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. It's medical regulations. And we at SLDN are going to work to change the medical regulations so anybody who wants to serve and is qualified to serve can do so.
Can I just say, I'm not particularly advocating for transsexuals to be on active duty. I think it's a really complicated issue, and it's a medical issue. And I'm not saying I'm against it or for it. I just think that needs a lot of examination. And transition is such a difficult psychological, spiritual, and physical process that I wouldn't have wanted to be going through all that on top of boot camp and the first Gulf War and everything. So, you know, I would say it's kind of a do it before, after thing at this point. I don't know. It needs a lot more.
Yeah, it needs education. You know, remember it took us 17 years to get Don't Ask, Don't Tell done away with. So it takes an education of the people that are going to let them understand it. It can be done. The British have done this. Matter of fact, people don't know this, but the British brought in transgender people, transsexual people, before they brought gay people in, because it was under their medical, their health system. So it was just a medical issue for them. So once somebody was transitioned, they were fine. And there are 10 or 15 in the British military right now that have transitioned and are serving honorably.
So it's clear that SLDN is an umbrella organization that addresses a variety of needs of service members. Some of SLDN's work that has garnered the most headlines are some frontline cases, and we have someone representative of one of the cases here with us today. It's been active in headlines for the past couple of weeks. A lot of the questions that we explore around this are not simply black and white, but there is gray. And there are questions of what do I do in a challenging situation? And someone who faced such a tremendous challenge at the age of 18 and it's now come home to roost and has been getting a lot of assistance from SLDN, among others, is JT Chestnut. JT, as much as you want to share with us about your story, please do.
Oh, I just want to say I purposely sat in because I wanted to feel like looking from the view, like right now. So, I have some glasses and dress going like this. I have my Joy Behar right here. But I was born and raised in Wilson, North Carolina, and I always knew I was gay from the get-go. I mean, I was one of those flaming queens. Back when I was a kid, my first album that I experienced was 1992, Bodyguard. So I knew I was one of them. But I came out the closet when I was 16, and I was hoping that my family would take it the way that I wanted them to take it. Like, hey, we love you, son, no matter what, but they did. My mom's a Southern Baptist minister, and my dad is like one of those old-fashioned, hand-in-the-bell type of guys. And my dad beat the crap out of me after I came out. And my parents disowned me, and I was kicked out. I stayed with my best friend's family till I was 18, and I had the chance to get out of foster care. Even though I was in foster care, they took me in their own. The system gave me the choice: you can, since you're 18, you can still stay with them, or you can stay with your family. And at the time, my mom and my dad were separated due to the fact after I came out, I did a lot of problems in their marriage, so I decided to stay with my mom. And that went well until I graduated from high school, and I had the chance to go to New York City for school, to go to AMDA for musical theater. And my dad came home one night without my mom's permission in my mom's house, and I was by myself. And he confronted me face to face, man to man. He scared the crap out of me, and I thought I was going to die that night again. He said, the only way I'll forgive you for being gay is if you join the Army. And I want you to join the Army. And you have no choice but to, because if you don't, I will kill you. So during that process, we went to the recruiting station in my hometown, and he was by my side the whole time, displaying to the recruiting officer how much of a supporting father he was, but only I knew the fact that if I did not sign those papers, he was going to whip my ass, and there was nothing I could do about it. Excuse me, Lord. So we signed the papers, and I was sent off to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for basic training. Before I left, my dad said, I know you're a talented guy, and I thought he was going to give me some props about doing my thing and do whatever. He was like, I know you're a talented guy, and I want you to use your deep voice while you're in basic training. And I said, all right, whatever. So the first time I had a drill sergeant talk to me, he was like, what's your name? I was like, Robert Chestnut, sir. Pleasure to meet you. Well, I had to talk like that, and even though I did not feel comfortable that way, it made me go through basic training as smooth as possible. I was the top of my platoon. I was a PT stud. I was running. I passed all the PT tests until there was a guy who was in my platoon, and we bunked together, and he just did not like me from the get-go. I wasn't sure why. And I was very active in the church on bass, and I was the leader of the choir. And one night when I was sleeping, the commanding officer, the first sergeant of the company, took me out of my room, and they said, Chester, we got to place you in another company. We can't explain it right now, but you have to leave. So I packed all my stuff and went to the next company, which was Delta, and I was in Charlie, which was next door. And I was like, what's going on? And the next day, I had an investigator come to the company and said, Private Chestnut, you're being accused of homosexual conduct. And I said, I'm not sure what's going on, but I haven't done anything. And the chaplain of the church that I went to came to the office, plus the commanding officer, and plus the guy who accused me of doing whatever, said Chestnut was the one who started to hit on me, and I felt so uncomfortable, and then he started looking at me this way, started looking at me in that way, and I was cornered by the people that I thought would support me and thought that I was doing what I was supposed to do. And they asked me, are you gay, are you gay, are you gay? And it pressured me so much that I said, yes, I am. And as soon as I said that, that's where the transition happened. within the company. The whole battalion heard about what I did, and that's when the bullying and the harassment started. We were in the chow hall, and I was pushed and shoved for a good 10 minutes before any commanding officer, before any sergeant came to my honor, came to my, to help me out. During PT, I would be pushed off the track, and I would have scuffs, and it was horrible. It felt like I was living with my dad all over again. And it was to the point where I said, I don't know what to do. I feel like no one's going to be there for me, and I felt alone. And I said, I just have to get out. I just don't know what else to do. And I did not want to go AWOL. But one night, on November 22nd, 2007, I said a prayer. I put on some civilian clothes. I packed a huge bag. And I said, I'm going to do this. And I don't know how the heck I got out of a base with so much security just to get out of there on a taxi to a Greyhound bus and just went back to North Carolina. And when I went back home, my parents were surprised. They were like, oh, you're home? And I was like, yep, I graduated from basic training. Yeah, I did it, they said. And we didn't have to come. Nope, not at all. I'm good to go. I'm good to go. And then about a week later, my parents confronted me. They were like, we know you went AWOL. You have to go back. And I said, I can't go back. I don't know what else to do. And we had this huge argument, and I only had $500 to my name. And I said, whatever, I'm going out to California. And they started to laugh. They said, ain't no way in the world you can go out to California and just do your thing, because you don't know anybody there, and we're not going to support you. So within the next 2 days, I was on Craigslist. I'd never heard of a Craigslist before. And I was on Craigslist looking for jobs in California. And luckily, I got a job as a personal assistant. And I told the guy my story. I bought myself a bus ticket from Wilson, North Carolina to Phoenix, Arizona when I was 18 over Christmas break. And I called my future boss and said, hey, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, if that's close to California. and he bought my ticket to Laguna Beach. And I lived in Laguna for a year. And I moved up to LA. And I've never heard of a West Hollywood. But I just heard that West Hollywood was the place to be if you wanted to be out and to be gay. And I admit, I was a wild horse back then. And I had a fake ID, I went to the Abbey, and I went this and that. But at the same time, I found my home and my chosen family. And I got into activism. I worked at the Obama campaign, the Obama headquarters on Santa Monica and Crescent Heights, and I helped with No on 8. And I found so many people who were all about this cause for years, and I learned from them, and I finally felt that I was at home. And then Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the repeal happened. Everyone was happy, everyone was good to go, but I knew for a fact that God was trying to tell me something. And I'm not sure what it was, but then the dreams began. The dreams of mine began of me getting caught, because for the past 4 years, I felt like I was looking over my shoulder the whole time. And then it was just consuming me to the point where I didn't know what to do. This was my dark secret that no one knew, none of my friends. It was like, it felt like it was that Desperate Housewives thing. I know what you did, it makes me sick, I'm going to tell. That's what it felt like. And I didn't know what else to do. So on Halloween night, unfortunately, I'm never going to celebrate Halloween again, because that was the day that I got arrested. But on Halloween night, I was about to go to a house party, and I was dressed up as Whitney Houston, and I jaywalked.
You were dressed up as Whitney, and you jaywalked.
Yeah, I was dressed up as Whitney Houston, and I jaywalked on Romaine and Fairfax. And after I crossed the street, there was a sheriff right there waiting for me, because he knew what I did. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm just heading to a friend's house. And they said, let's run your driver's license right quick. And that's when I knew. And as soon as they said, all right, we have an Article 86 AWOL warrant, I just started to cry, because I knew what was going to happen. So I was locked up in WeHo jail overnight. I was taken to LA County Jail, which was the worst experience in the whole wide world. It felt like I was in an episode of Law & Order SVU. I couldn't handle it. So for 2 days I was there, and I was given direct orders after my release to report to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And I only had 6 hours to myself. I went back home, I made a carry-on bag, and I just came out on Facebook. I just told my friends the truth, what I'm telling you guys right now. And I said, I'm scared for my life. I feel like I'm going to be in prison. I'm never going to see y'all ever again. So when I got on the plane on LAX to go to LAX to Fort Worth, I was crying like a baby on the plane. Got to Fort Worth, crying like a baby at Fort Worth. Got to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, went to the bathroom stall, cried for about a good 10 minutes because I didn't know what was going to happen to me. And I turned myself in. The MPs, military police came. I was locked up for about 2 to 3 days. I couldn't do anything, and then I was transferred to the personal control facility where they had AWOL soldiers at. At that time, I only had access to my phone for only a couple of times, and that's where one of my heroes called me up, thanks to my sister who's in North Carolina, who was my eyes and ears. And then when I had my phone, I did not know I had so much support from the community that I called my home in LA. And Ben Patrick reached out to me too, and it felt like a touch by an angel de la Reese moment. That's when I knew that I had people there for me. When it came to determine my fate, what it was going to be, I met up with JAG and the legal team, and I heard someone say, "Chestnut, come forth." And it was an officer, it was the Major General of the commanding post of Fort Sill, and he said, "First of all, I'd like to apologize on behalf of the U.S. Army for what you went through back when you were in basic training. It's unfortunate for any soldier to go AWOL, and it was very unfortunate in your case. I'd like to present to you, instead of a court-martial, just a general discharge for what you went through." And I said, "May I have permission to speak off the record, sir?" And then he said yes. And I was like, "How did you know this about me?" He was like, "You're in the news, in case you didn't know." And I was like, all right. I was on the Twitters and the Facebooks, and I was like, my friends looked out for me. So he said, "If I give you a general discharge, you have to stay here for a couple more weeks." And I was like, I said, "I can't stay here mentally anymore because I'm just ready to get back." So I was given an other than honorable discharge. Got permission to him to leave tomorrow, the next day, which was Thursday, after 1,300 hours. And being back here in LA made me realize how much I love my friends and my family here, how I have no more secrets. I can truly be out, I can truly be open, and I do have the most respect for our men and our women in service. But I'm glad where I'm at right now, and I'm just going to power on and keep being the person that I am today.
We're running tight on time. I do want to open for questions briefly, but before we do, Tom, will you please touch once again on the, you were talking about, and forgive my fuzziness on this, the organization or the initiative regarding chaplains and regarding, and any way that we as a community, we can put this on the church Facebook later, how we can support that.
Great. It's called the Forum on the Military Chaplaincy, and it was set up as a committee of Service Members Legal Defense Network to deal with this chaplain issue. And what we've decided to do, just last week I was in Dallas at a meeting of the leadership of this group. We were at the Cathedral of Hope, which is the largest gay church in the country. If you ever get there, go. It's a three-ring circus. They got orchestras and choirs, and it's amazing. But we decided that we're going to set up our own 501c3 to break away from SLDN. We've been getting support from SLDN and HRC financially, but the times are tough, and it's hard to ask for money from other organizations, so we're going to set up our own and do our own fundraising. And our mission is essentially going to go beyond the LGBT issues, because, as I mentioned, the chaplains are supposed to work with any service member and help any service member, regardless of what faith they have or if they don't have faith. They're there to assist the commanders and to help with human morale. And with this shift to the right, the evangelicals have really looked at this as a recruiting ground for proselytizing. I mean, they're supported by Campus Crusade for Christ and the Focus on the Family and the American Family Association. All the crazy people are supporting them. So we need to have a voice on the other side, and we're going to be that voice. They've actually set up another organization just last week called CARL, Chaplains Alliance for Religious Liberty. It's It's made up of conservative retired chaplains who believe that their religious liberty is being impugned because they have to deal with LGBT people now. And I'm sure you all read about the fact that now the DOD issued regulations saying that in states where marriage is permitted, or there's a military base, the chaplains, if they choose to, can participate in weddings if their denomination allows that. And our opponents are saying, oh no, they're forcing us to marry gay people. And they are supported by a group called the Alliance Defense Fund, which has a $33 million budget. These are lawyers, and we cross swords with them all the time. We file an amicus brief in the log cabin Republican case, which you probably all followed, that's now gone by the wayside. So we file briefs, we write editorials, we got blogs, we're about to get our website up and running. And what we want to do is make sure that the chaplains are pluralistic, that they do what they're supposed to do. They either, at the chaplain school at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, it's a joint school, they have signs. They used to have signs.